Let's begin our program this evening by sort of laying out what each member of our panel thinks are the priorities. While we're doing that, I invite our viewers to call in with your questions, and we'll make sure that we get them to the panel. We already have a couple, and we'll get to those in a little bit. Let's start with our veteran legislature, Senator Lopez-Franzen. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the priorities that you see in this session. I would just mention to our viewers, I'm sure they're all aware, there's a $7 billion surplus, and that's driving at least some of the conversation. But there are, of course, many issues, and our members on the panel this evening are concerned about a variety of issues that need to be addressed. So, Senator, the floor is yours. Take us through a couple of minutes worth of summary of what do you see as the priorities.
Thank you. Well, we have heard a lot about this surplus and what to do with it. So there's a variety of options we can do with it. Certainly, we can use some and invest in and spend it, or we can save some, or we can send it back to some of the taxpayers who've sent it to us in the first place. So we have opportunities to do a lot of investments and supports for folks who have been disproportionately impacted with this pandemic. But we also hear, and I hear in my district, where we've had a series of carjackings in the last month, period of month. We've had 3 carjackings. So public safety is on the minds of my constituents, in particular, in the minds of a lot of Minnesotans who are seeing an uptick in crime. So we have to tackle that, and we will. I would say that we would also want to make sure that we tackle the workforce shortage we see, which we've seen in nursing homes and hospitals, and there is a dire need as well in the teaching area. So we have to tackle those issues, and that is the role of government. But at the same time, it's a partnership with the public, and with the public partnership with and private partnerships with businesses as well. The other piece too, like I mentioned, education is huge, and we know that there's a lot of students who have lagged. I have 2 little ones, and know that they have not had the experiences that normal 5 and 6 year olds would have in the last couple of years, and we're going to have to tackle those gaps and those getting them back in the schools and getting them back to the experiences and the services that they expect from our communities. So those are things that are on our mind. Certainly, there's talk about potentially supporting small business in terms of the unemployment insurance trust fund, which was a mechanism that we used during the pandemic to support workers and families when they were not working because of the executive order to keep people safe from COVID when we had no idea what was coming ahead. And now that we've learned a lot, we've also have exhausted the unemployment insurance fund, which now has a deficit. And I was, when I was a freshman back in 2013, I was an author of a bill to lower the tax rate to the lowest we could at that point because it was flush with cash and we had a surplus. So the tables have turned and we have to address that. So I know that that's going to be top of mind of how do we support small businesses, but also how do we target tax cuts to those who need them the most. And in this case, we know that a lot of folks are still struggling, some without jobs, some without the paycheck that they need because of inflation to cover the costs of groceries and to cover the costs of fuel and utilities. So we know that those are the things that people are thinking about right now, bread and butter issues that we need to tackle. So we have to come with caution and responsible fiscal responsibility in terms of what we're going to do with this money, because it's one time. So we have the opportunity to make some big improvements, but we also have to be cautious of the future. So I look forward to working with folks on the other side of the aisle to come to an agreement and compromise of what we're going to do to set Minnesota for success. But we also know that everyone has been impacted by this last few years, and we want to show a roadmap for Minnesotans to believe in the hope and the future that we can have together, learning a lot from this experience, but also coming out of it stronger with this opportunity that we have in this surplus and in this budget, and also the funding coming from the federal government with the infrastructure bill that also has been approved. So those are some thoughts, and I'm sure we'll get into more with the questions.
Senator Johnson, did I see in the paper this morning, the Star Tribune, that the amount of that deficit on the unemployment insurance was something in the neighborhood of $2.7 billion? Does that number seem right? So that's a pretty big
sounds
ticket
about right
there. Yeah, very good. Well, Senator Johnson, your priorities, your thoughts.
Yeah, Justice Anderson, I think, early on before the pandemic, the governor had a campaign promise where we're going to be one Minnesota. And when you see how that played out, what it feels like is a very top-down dictated Minnesota. So we have mandates, we have all these things going on from the top going down to the people. And what the Republican caucus in the Senate is really focused on is how do we address the needs of all Minnesotans. So we're starting at the bottom. We are on track. We are going on track to do three things that we're really laser focused on. We want to make sure that the economy is doing well. We want to focus on education. That we've seen what's happened to our students over the last 2 years. We got to get back on track with education. And public safety is our third. We got to make sure that people feel safe in their homes and in their communities. So we're doing a number of things with that. First of all, education. We got to empower the parent. We've seen over these last 2 years how critical the parent is in the child's education, whether they're at home or in the school. They're integral into the process of educating their child, not indoctrinating them, but educating them so they can critically think. That's the role that we need to be playing. Can they critically think and function in society? That's a big deal. We're going to do that. The other thing that we want to do is make sure kids are in the classroom again. We've seen the detriments. We've seen the research on children being at home in front of a computer screen or an iPhone screen, whatever it is that they're doing their education on. It's time to bring them back into the classroom where they can actually concentrate on their learning. We want to also look at law enforcement. Senator Franzen hit it right on. I mean, people are concerned. It doesn't matter if you're in Edina or if you're in downtown Minneapolis. That's a big concern for citizens. And we got to address that. Some of the things that we're talking about doing is finding pathways for new recruits to law enforcement. Maybe that can be some grant programs that we're doing, but there's got to be a way to do that. We also need to look at the other side of the equation too, on the criminal side. We need to enforce those mandatory minimums, just to make sure that the violent criminals are not going out back onto the street, this revolving door that we see, where the same criminals are getting out and committing crimes. It's got to be disheartening to be a law enforcement agent and see the same guys coming back out over and over again onto the streets. And then finally, if we want to talk a little bit about economics too, we want to make sure that we have a broad base. We see that we're overtaxing our citizens. So how can we do a broad base of relief for our citizens? Well, number one, let's start with senior citizens. One of the most egregious taxes I think that we have is the tax on Social Security benefits. You go out and you talk to folks in the coffee shop. That's one of the first questions you get is, hey, Mark, when are you going to get that tax off of my Social Security benefits? So that's a big deal. Let's look at things like lowering the first marginal rate. That's a broad base that will help all families across the state, not just individual particular groups, but let's help more people. Let's help the state so that we can grow and thrive. Those are the main three things that we're going to be zeroed in on this session, and I'm looking forward to working with.
Very good. Representative Olson, the floor is yours. What priorities and projects do you see as taking the most attention in this session?
Right. And I think, we've seen a well-managed state that we're in a place where we can be looking at a surplus and going into the second year of our biennium, which is a great place to be. We don't want to, a deficit would be an incredibly hard place to be in a pandemic. So we're seeing a well-managed state economically from that standpoint. But we know people are hurting. I mean, we hear it every day in districts across the state. People are feeling the effects of the pandemic. They're feeling the effects of a number of workforce shortage, all of the things that came with surviving the last 2 years. And so the DFL House Caucus has been crystal clear that we want to center workers and make sure that people that are struggling can feel can get through with what they need to survive. So that means a number of things. It means putting forward an economic security package that centers people that haven't done well in this pandemic. It doesn't put wealthy corporations and wealthy individuals who we know did just fine. It centers people who didn't. It's really investing in those that have been at the bedside as nurses. It's our teachers. It's our mental health practitioners. It's making sure people have what they need to stay working and stay in the workforce and make sure that people feel safe and healthy and have those benefits. It's making sure people have stable housing. We've heard, especially in greater Minnesota, that's a huge issue that we plan to tackle and have put forward serious investment in that. We know childcare shortage, especially again in my district, and I know throughout Northeast Minnesota and many parts of greater Minnesota, that we really need, if we want to tackle workforce, we have to tackle childcare. And so that's been something I personally have worked on, but has also been a big priority of our caucus and will continue to be. And we know despite all of this and the urgent needs we have around these issues that have just been made more clear during COVID, we also have a climate crisis. And we need to continue to not turn a blind eye to that, but to address that head on. So the House has put forward a set of proposals around investing in making sure that we're addressing the climate crisis and investing in our environment that we have here in Minnesota that we recreate in and we love. And so we're really looking at a full package of things that really make sure we meet Minnesotans where they're at in this moment, but we don't turn away from the future that we also need to be investing in. So this is not the time to have giveaways to wealthy individuals and corporations, but it's a time to really help those that are hurting, that tell us about those economic pocketbook concerns that keep them up every night. They worry about their families, they worry about their kids, and that's exactly the kind of person that we're thinking about when we're putting forward our House proposal this year.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Representative Demuth, the floor is yours. What priorities do you see in this session?
Thank you, Justice Anderson. The priorities that I see in this upcoming session, a lot of them have already been talked about, which is a good sign in a bipartisan fashion, but we do need to address the increase in crime in our state. And that is not just in our metro area, but as that spreads out throughout the state, there is concern all over from east to west, north to south. So definitely increasing public safety, addressing the crime, and that would be at a local and state level. One of the other things that's very important is tax relief, as we've already heard from Senator Johnson. Ending that tax on Social Security. We need to be able to keep our seniors in the state of Minnesota. It's a great place to be. Our weather has much variety, and so it's great to have the opportunity to keep them, and it shouldn't be a tax on Social Security as one of the factors that might be driving them away. The unemployment insurance relief is important to our businesses. It's something that we shouldn't delay. We shouldn't wait till the end of session, but we need to get that done and tackled right away as we enter in. And then also in the area of education, our kids, our teachers, our school districts have faced enormous challenges in addition to our families, where we've had families working full-time and teaching their children during distance learning. Keeping our kids in the classroom is very important, and we need to understand where they are educationally, where are those gaps, how can we improve the student achievement and address that learning loss. Mental health is also an important factor with our youngest learners, all the way up through seniors in high school. We need to address the mental health piece also in our education system. I know we're going to be talking more, but those are kind of the top four that I'm looking forward to working on right away when we get back into session.
Very good.